Hi, you're watching Floyd Steinberg's YouTube channel. So, what's up with my Alesis Micron? A while ago I bought this Alesis Micron on eBay for cheap and the owner sold it as broken. So I tried to repair it and I made a video about this, you can view it here. But in order to summarize the problems with the synth, here's a short snippet from that video. So, did I manage to repair it? And if I did, what did I have to do to repair it? Let's take a look. So, this Micron suffers from distorted sound, and also the pitch wheel, the potentiometers and the mod sliders do not work at all, as you can see here. In the last video, I could reduce the likely cause of this problem to the PCB containing the 3 knobs. When I unplugged the PCB, the synth started sounding normal. I then looked at the Micron's schematics in its service manual, and I assumed one of the ICs might be damaged, and my best guess was a voltage comparator chip named LM339 was the culprit. I then ordered some spare parts and I posted my video. So when I released that first video, something incredible happened and a lot of people gave me some good advice, but one of them really stood out with a profound analysis of what might be the problem here. And this user took it upon himself or herself to study the technical manual for the Alesis Micron and try to find what could be wrong, and then spent hours and hours guiding me through the process of trying to repair this thing. So yeah, what can I say? I really owe you one. I will now try to explain how parts of the electronics in this synthesizer work, and as always, take this information with a pinch of salt. Remember that big chip I showed you in the last video? That is called a Field Programmable Gate Array, short FPGA. In short words, this is an integrated system that can be programmed to your needs, and its purpose here is direct to all the user inputs. The defective PCB and the keyboard and all the pedals are more or less directly connected to this chip. On the schematic, you can see each pin of the chip is connected to one function crucial for running this synthesizer. Among other things, you can see the pins for the misbehaving pots and sliders in the bottom right corner. The main purpose of the PCB I identified as defective in the last video is to convert the user's input into a format that is readable by the FPGA chip. When we look at the schematic for that board, we can see it's divided into 3 separate circuits. One is processing the buttons, one is operating the pitch wheel LEDs, and one is for reading the knobs, sliders, and the pitch wheel. Knowing this, we can safely ignore all the components for the LEDs and switches, as they are known to work, which also means I really didn't need to buy that 74HC595 chip. Oh well. I now needed to learn how that potentiometer circuit works, and it's quite a clever design. Remember the board has some capacitors on it? Well, they're part of an electrical circuit that generates a saw wave pulse. Capacitors are electrical components that store an electrical charge. So this circuit here slowly charges those capacitors and then shorts them, so they release the charge they collected in a short burst. And this then produces a saw wave that is pulsing at a fixed frequency. So my first assignment was to check if that saw wave shaped electrical pulse exists. Luckily, I still had that cheap oscilloscope from my FM Basics video here, and using some cloth pins on the crocodile clamps, I could indeed see that saw wave pulse on one of the SMD transistors. And this of course meant both the capacitors and the LM339 voltage comparator chip, which regulates the charge and discharge of them, are well and alive, so there was no need to buy a replacement. Ugh. So, back to the circuit. We now know there's a saw wave pulse running, and our comparator chip will pick up the sawtooth and the voltage measured on the potentiometers and compare them. And as a saw wave is pulsing in time, the FPGA can then determine in which direction you're moving the potentiometers or knobs. So the next thing I needed to check was the so-called reference voltage. Without going into the details, The voltage comparator chip is kind of a complex switch, which will turn on or turn off things by comparing one voltage to another. So it needs one voltage that can be measured and one voltage to compare the measurement to. And on this board, the reference voltage should be readable at these pins here. So I got my multimeter out and tried to measure the voltage there, and surprise! There was no voltage there. And that's not good, of course, because without that reference voltage, the system can't read the movement of the knobs properly, because it has nothing to compare it to. So now we're really close to solving this puzzle. All we need to do now is to follow the traces on the board to the next electrical component, and that's this tiny SMD transistor here. So, in short, transistors can be used as amplifiers, and this transistor here is used to stabilize the reference voltage needed by the voltage comparator chip and the FPGA. A transistor has three legs called the base, the emitter, and the collector. When working as an amplifier, a small current on the base makes a big current flow from the emitter to the collector, and we expect to see a big current here. But there is none, so we can safely assume this transistor is dead. So let's remove it. And that was the point I ruined my soldering iron, because I never removed SMD parts before in my life, so I tried to heat up this transistor to melt the solder, pushing my soldering iron too hard, so it broke. Oh well. So theoretically, I could just use a standard S8050 transistor as a replacement, and luckily I had some of those in my assortment of various electronic parts. Now I just needed to look up the pin assignment in the spec sheet and solder this in place. Luckily, with my new soldering iron, this was the easiest part of the job. I just applied some flux and solder before placing the transistor, and also be careful when bending the transistor's legs to fit. Best is to bend them in the middle of the legs using tweezers. A short check if the transistor is behaving as expected, and the reference voltage, which previously wasn't there, now showed up. And after plugging the board back in, the knobs and sliders were working as expected, and I was really happy to see this, but unfortunately the sound still was distorted. After checking all the cables and parts and finding no flaw, I came up with a theory that someone had already tinkered with the synth before. So I looked up some photos of the Micron pitch wheel on eBay. And indeed, the cable connection of the pitch wheel had been reversed. Our theory is that the Micron calibrates the pitch wheel when switched on, and that the negative polarity isn't expected. So after swapping the wires, the synth now worked flawlessly, and that's the story how I made my first electronics repair with more than a helping hand from some unknown internet benefactor. Yeah, and that's it for today. I hope you found this interesting and useful. And once again we saw analyzing problems logically only gets you there halfway. The other half is reading and learning things and trusting the experts. And with that conclusion, thanks again for watching, and see you again very, very soon. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and like if you like this video. Bye bye.